Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this licensing panel. I must first read the webcasting introduction. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. Please could I remind members of the public who have registered to speak that they should start their microphones by pushing the button and then turning them off again afterwards, and the same for the applicants. Please be aware that if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman. We don't have any apologies, but on the agenda, the front of the agenda, there is a fifth member, which is Councillor John Whitehouse. But this is a mistake. He shouldn't have been on the agenda, and it is in his ward as well. So that's the only thing I've got to report.
Okay, thank you very much. For the webcast and for those attending, I will introduce us. My name is Councillor Paul Kesker, and I am chairman of today's panel. To my right is Councillor Alan Lyon, and to his right is Councillor Darjan Sangha. To my left is Graham Oakley, who is our legal advisor. To his left is Jackie from Democratic Services, and who will take the minutes. And right over there to the right is Rebecca, who is dealing with the webcast. Do we have any declarations of interest? Jackie? No?
No declarations of interest.
No, been recorded. Okay, thank you. I will just run through the procedure for you. Essentially, first, the officers, the licensing officers, will give us a rundown on the application. It's then down to the applicant to state their case, which will be open to question from the panel and from the objectors. We will then listen to the objections from objectors, and they will be open to question from the panel and from the applicants. We will, at the end, have a closing statement from the objectors and a closing statement from the applicants, but nothing new should be brought in at that point that hasn't been mentioned in your initial statement. So, if I could ask officers, we are dealing with item 5, which is application for a premises licence for Funky Monk, 236 High Street, Epping, CM16 4AP. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Funky Monk Essex Limited are the current holders of a premises licence at 236 High Street, Epping. That premises licence permits the sale of alcohol on the premises between 12 p.m. and 11:30 p.m, recorded music between 12 p.m. and midnight, and late night refreshment between 11 p.m. and midnight, 7 days a week. Funky Monk have now applied for the grant of a new premises licence at this location for the following licensable activities: the provision of recorded music, Sunday to Thursday, between 8 a.m. and midnight, and on Friday and Saturday, between 8 a.m. and 1 a.m. Late night refreshment, Sunday to Thursday, between 11 p.m. and midnight, and on Friday and Saturday, between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. The sale by retail of alcohol for consumption on the premises, Sunday to Thursday, between 8 a.m. and midnight, and on Friday and Saturday, between 8 a.m. and 1 a.m. The opening hours of the premises shall be Sunday to Thursday between 8 a.m. and 12:30 a.m. and Friday and Saturday between 8 a.m. and 1:30 a.m. Full details of the application, including the operating schedule, which sets out the conditions that will be attached to the licence if it were to be granted, can be found within the report. The application was received on the 22nd of September 2022. The responsible authorities have all received a copy of the application. It was also advertised at the premises and in a local newspaper. A copy of the blue notice and the newspaper advert are attached to this report. In addition, all residences and businesses within 150 metres radius of the premises were also written to and notified of the application. We have received no representations from the responsible authorities. However, we have received seven representations opposing the application from local residents. The representations relate to the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, and the prevention of public nuisance. Copies of the objections received are attached to this report. It should be noted, however, that a number of appendices attached to Mr Morden's letter, which can be found at pages 48 to 59 of the report, have not been included as they relate to matters outside the scope of the Licensing Act. The subcommittee will be aware a representation is only considered relevant if it relates to the likely effect of the grant of the licence on the promotion of at least one of the key licensing objectives. A representation or parts of a representation that fail to do so cannot be considered, and Mr Morden has been advised accordingly. The subcommittee may also wish to note that Epping Town Council were also made aware of the new application. This was discussed at their Planning and General Purposes meeting on the 11th of October. During that meeting, the committee considered the application and determined not to make a representation opposing this application. The subcommittee is therefore asked to determine the application having regard to the content of the officer's report and representations received, any additional information obtained from the hearing, the Council Statement of Licensing Policy, guidance issued by the Secretary of State, and the steps appropriate to promote the licensing objectives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now take the applicant. If I could ask, before you start to speak, if you would turn your microphone and then identify yourself by name for the recording and for our minutes.
Certainly, Chair. My name's Guy Hicks. I am employed by David Dad Solicitors, LLP. I'm here to represent these guys who are the applicants for this matter, the Funky Monk. The venue was previously the Thatched House Hotel. The applicant is looking to establish a new licence creating a hotel stroke restaurant stroke wine bar, which will be food-led with a vibe dining type experience. The refurbishment itself has cost in the region of £1 million. The applicants will employ approximately 40 local people, and their target audience is 25 years plus. And their price point is fairly high end. For example, $5.25 for a beer, anywhere between £25 and £600 for wine or champagne. And there's no beer on tap, so there'll be no pints served in glasses. The capacity of the venue, which is yet to be confirmed with the fire service, but so I'll use approximate figures at this stage, is 90 seated and 40 standing. The new licence seeks licensable activities, as you heard, until midnight Sunday to Thursday and 0100 on Fridays and Saturdays. And that's with opening hours 30 minutes later, and that's in order to wind down quietly and disperse. These times have been agreed, as you know, with the police and other responsible authorities. Music will be in the form of DJs, saxophonists, guitarists, but the emphasis on any music will be chilled, i.e. quiet, not too loud to spoil the dining experience. And we also have to bear in mind at this point, whilst this application is ongoing, there may well be an application in the future, and there's an existing licence for the hotel above. And these guys will explain to you at some stage, if I may bring them into the conversation, the importance of not ruining the experience for hotel guests who are staying in the rooms above. Therefore, music activities will all be kept to a minimum. As you'll see in your pack, there are conditions that again have been agreed with authorities. I'll very quickly run through those. Challenge 25. There's full CCTV throughout the premises, which will be stored for 31 days and made available to the authorities on reasonable request. There'll be a full incident log, and that will record any crime, any objections, any complaints received by the venue, any disorder, seizures of drugs and weapons, CCTV faults, any refusals, and any visit by a responsible authority. There will also be a training condition, and this will be for any new staff inducted into the premises, and it will be ongoing, refreshed on a yearly basis for all other staff. And there will be records of that training which will be maintained for inspection by any relevant authority. In terms of consumption in the courtyard at the rear, this will be finished at 10 p.m, so that courtyard will be cleared at 10 o'clock at night. Essentially, courtyard, beer garden, same sort of thing. The applicants in this matter are all of good character. No issues regarding them being unsuitable for being premises licence holders, and any matters that would have been in place would have been raised by the police, and obviously they're not here today to raise any issues. Planning matters, whilst they are a separate regime to the licensing regime, I do think it fair to make clear that the planning has all been dealt with, and their permission has been successful, and it's all been signed off, and that includes with Heritage England in relation to the Grade 2 listed aspects of the building, which I'm told has been there since 1500 as a matter of interest. The applicants recognise that the area has changed slightly since the venue was previously open, and hence there are residential premises nearby, which made us have the condition of closing that courtyard at 10 p.m. They will also rely on the agent of change principle, which I'll give you a very quick summary of. The agent of change principle places the responsibility for mitigating impacts from existing noise-generating activities or uses on the proposed new noise-sensitive development. In other words, the person or business responsible for the change must also be responsible for managing the impact of the change. The venue has operated a number of TENs, and these have been without issue. As far as we're aware, there have been no complaints, bar one issue that was raised in terms of emptying bins. Is it okay, Chair, if I bring in the DPS?
Yes, please do.
He's going to explain how they now deal with their waste aspects so as not to upset residents.
Okay. Turn your microphone off. Got to turn the other one on. Okay. Yep. Turn it. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Billy Shea. I'm the DPS. Obviously, we had a night on Saturday, an event which was a test for us, and we managed to figure out obviously a solution for the bins. Now, when we emptied the bins, it was quite late, around sort of 10:30, and it was very loud for residents, and it was something that just cannot continue to happen. We've now come up with a solution with a bottle chute, which all glass bottles will go straight down to the cellar, and we will take them out and clean them out in the morning. And also we're going to set a curfew that no bottles will be emptied at the bin outside the rear of the property at 9:30, just to avoid noise. Obviously that happened on Saturday, and I apologise for it happening on the Saturday night. It was loud, but we tested that. Obviously that was a test, and then we will make a change.
Thank you. Yep. Please continue.
Thank you, Chair. So hopefully you can see there, an issue's been identified, and we're on it. We've dealt with it straight away. So that shouldn't crop up again. It won't crop up again. In terms of, there's been comments made in relation to company directors, and I feel that Ryan here was subject to some of those representations, and if I may, he's going to explain briefly the issues around being a company director and the dissolved companies. He would also like to just talk about social media aspects of the Funky Monk, because there's an important part of that. And I think it's fair that he should also talk about the concerns of noise and how protecting their guests within the hotel is as important as protecting those outside of the venue, if I may.
Right. Okay. Again, would you just identify yourself before you speak?
Yes. Hi. Right. I'm Ryan Mason, one of the directors of Funky Monk. So firstly, just to address, I don't think it's actually part of the licensing requirements, but just to address the facts that were brought up regarding companies going into liquidation, etc. My profession by trade is an accountant, and I've represented getting towards probably 100 companies over the years. Some of those companies have been liquidated, of course, but none of my personal companies have ever been liquidated owing money or anything like that. So just to be clear on that. In terms of our social media and our work with our local residents and community, part of our website will be, we will have a page that will outline all of the contact details and the procedures that we are going to put in place to basically take complaints on board and deal with any issues. In addition, we're going to be working with the community and adding value to the local community with regards to sponsorship of local sports teams and such like. So just to be clear, we're here to make this area better and not to be detrimental towards it. Also, what was the next thing on our list? Yeah, so commercially, we've spent a hell of a lot of money in terms of our hotel offering. It's a very high-end offering, and it represents a large proportion of our business. The nature of the building is that it's got very, very poor sound insulation. So one of our key priorities is to ensure that our guests, our paying guests, have a good night's sleep and a comfortable stay. So I would hope that this would give further assurance to anybody concerned about noise or any kind of other disturbance that we are commercially invested, as well as wanting to look after our local community, but we are commercially invested ourselves in making sure that that is the case. I think that's it.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to that, price point for the rooms, £150 to £400. We've got some pictures of the room, which I appreciate weren't circulated in the original bundle. If you'd like to look at those, if the residents would like to look at those, it just gives you an idea and a feel for, you know, that this is a quality hotel. They're not going to have, you know, stag do's and the like there. It's you know, really decent price point rooms.
Thank you for your offer, but as it's not part of the bundle and
No, that's
isn't
fine.
public, we can't.
I appreciate that, Chair. Thank you anyway. I think I'll leave it at that point, if I may.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we'll now go first to questions from the panel. Councillor Lyon.
Yeah, my microphone's not working. I'll have to use this one. Thank you very much for that information. My first question relates to the timing of the licence. You're talking about 8 a.m. for recording music, sale of alcohol and opening times of the premises. And is that absolutely necessary from your perspective, or could you explain why that's been proposed?
So the reason for that is for specific events, such as a Prosecco breakfast with Santa, that kind of thing. That is all we're trying to do with that particular piece of the licence. It's not a regular occurrence, but that's why we want that licence.
And the music as well, that's going to be from that time?
There would be lounge-style music with those kind of events, yes.
So it's background music,
Yeah.
not, as you said, with DJs and...
No.
at that sort
I
of
mean,
time.
I don't think there's much call for...
I wouldn't have thought so, but...
an 8 a.m. DJ,
yeah, I
in
just
fairness.
wanted to clarify
Yeah,
that point.
yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just very quickly clarify for you as
Yeah.
well that when people hear the word DJ, they automatically think nightclub, massive speakers. There's more of a trend nowadays that DJs are more often not playing in many restaurants around London, but they're not playing at the levels of nightclubs. They treat it as a bit of an art form, almost like a music act. So it's not necessarily about the volume, it's about them mixing their music and showing what they can do with the mixing desk, as opposed to, you know, this huge nightclub type scenario. I want to make that quite clear. And the other thing that I'd like to just underline at that point as well is that, you know, if we have background music at 8 o'clock in the morning, that music can't be at a level that will disturb the guests upstairs. You know, that's really important to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Simon.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I just interrupt just to clarify for members and everyone, the premises don't need actually, although they've applied for one, they don't actually need a licence for recording music until 11 o'clock at night. So they could play it all during the day, and they don't actually need a licence from the council.
Yeah. That's a question of interpretation of about 3 different laws, and I know most applicants still put it down, and we often make conditions on that basis, but you can actually play within a licensed premises. Councillor Sanger?
Thank you very much. I think businesses, hospitality industry, particularly at the moment, is going through some difficult times. I can understand why you want to apply for later licenses, but we have to have that balancing act with the residents as well, where they also have the right of quiet enjoyment of where they live. I note from the timings that it's on a Sunday it's till 10:30. It's up to 10:30? 12 o'clock. So in the surrounding areas, other establishments or other premises are up to 10:30. Are you set in stone that it's got to be midnight on Sundays? And my other question was relating to it was related to on the application you put here. There's some other times during the course of the year, say Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. I note that you've left it blank. Is there a reason why you've done that? You're not going to be applying for any late licenses later? Or? Thank you.
Yep, please.
Yeah, so I'll try and work through those. So midnight on a Sunday. The first thing, you spoke about other licences, Councillor, and at the end of the day, this application should be treated on its own merits. I don't believe we should be judged against what's going on with other premises. In terms of members of the public being able to enjoy their own homes, absolutely. You know, these guys are here for the long run. They're spending £1 million. You know, the pressures for them are huge. meaning that they want longevity in their business. You know, they don't want to upset their next door neighbours, etc. So, you know, they will have plans and policies in place. For example, a dispersal policy we can offer, you know, to ensure that we don't actually disturb the neighbourhood and create those issues that, you know, are rightly concerns for the residents. I understand why, but at the same time, you know, they perhaps need to understand that that's not what Funky Monk is all about. What was your final point? Sorry. Lost my thread. Christmas. Yeah, so at the end of the day, we can use temporary event notice applications for Christmas should the need arise.
Put in the tens. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Right. In which case, now you're open to question by objectors. Again, if you could obviously each take it in turns, push the microphone button, and please first just tell us your name so that we have that for the record. I don't know who would like to start. Yep. Okay. When you want the red light on, push again until that's it.
Okay, my name is Alan Phillips. I'm a resident. I've listened carefully to what you said. You mentioned about DJs and perhaps a saxophonist and a guitarist. Have you got any limits on leakage of decibel levels as a guide?
If you're going to answer, you have to turn your microphone off. The system will only allow one person to speak at a time.
Are you asking me if we are prepared to limit the noise levels with inside?
Well, I'm a musician and I get this all the time, and we get noise limiters. We have to do a health and safety if we're playing at certain venues about decibel levels. Now, I understand what you're saying, background music, and you don't want to disturb your guests. But I wondered, you know, after 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, particularly in the summer, if there's leakage from the building, and I appreciate you'll probably have quite good sound insulation, but glass, people, you know, you've got glass in the front and so on, there will be sound leakage, and residents will have their windows open, particularly in the summer. I just wonder if you had what you would think is an acceptable level of decibels, which is the way it's usually measured.
Actually offering a level of decibels now as a non-noise expert in respect of, you know, decibels, etc., noise limited, I wouldn't sit here and do that. But what I would say is, number one, our windows and doors will be closed throughout the summer because the premises are air conditioned. Number two, as I've said time and time again, I will underline again, and I will continue to underline, very conscious of our guests upstairs in the hotel rooms. And number three, if it was something that would offer comfort to residents and certainly the panel, then we would look at installing a noise limiter, which would be set and agreed with council officers to an acceptable level, which would then ensure noise leakage is kept to a minimum.
Okay, thank you. Another question?
I have, if I'm sorry. I'm sure there'll be lots of others. The other cause of noise from such premises is people leaving at night who had a couple of drinks and they are inconsiderate. I mean, do you have a view on this? You know, and you know, on a Sunday night at 11:30, the car door slamming and people having a laugh and a joke, all very harmless, but it does carry.
Yeah, of course we appreciate that, which is why we would offer a dispersal policy in the first instance. There will be occasions when, well, every time the venue's open late, staff will be interjecting with requests to customers to live quietly, consider the neighbourhood. And I'd also point out that from a price point of view and the target audience, you know, we're not looking at 18, 19, 20-year-olds who tend to be slightly more inconsiderate, unfortunately. You know, we're looking at the older generations that, you know, once they're told, will generally, and it's not to say that it won't happen, but I would also remind you that we're sitting on a high street in amongst lots of other busy premises. You know, and we don't believe that we will add to those disturbances.
Okay, thank you. Another one? No? Okay, who's next? Oh, well, whichever. Just introduce yourself first.
May I, Jeff Clark, local resident. Thank you very much. A number of questions. Air conditioning you mentioned. Will this presuppose that all doors and windows will remain closed?
Yes. Sorry? Yes.
Thank you. Second point, On parking, what provision will be made for parking? You haven't got any on that site.
The same as every other venue in the town. People will park where they can in the local car parks.
No?
So we do have limited parking, only five or six spaces, but we are negotiating at the moment an off-site parking solution for valet parking for our guests, which we is in negotiation.
I'm obliged to you. In other words, you haven't got any arrangement for parking at the moment. Another point I'd like to raise in connection with security.
I'll let you come back.
Sorry?
That's all right. Go on.
In connection with security, what security arrangements would exist during the evening and when closing time?
So the venue currently has 24-hour security, which relates to the hotel. The officer's job is to ensure residents, guests, etc., are quiet within the bounds of the hotel and with the grounds of the premises, for example, smoking areas, etc., around the outside. There are occasions when the venue will have their own SIA, Fridays and Saturdays, which you have, and Thursdays, two SIA, which is security guards.
Okay.
My principal concern related to the 1 o'clock and 1:30 proposed closing times. Are there additional security arrangements at those times?
No, there's no additional security arrangements. What I would say is that we don't anticipate the entire restaurant emptying out at 1:30 in the morning. At the end of the day, it's predominantly a restaurant. So some of that space within the restaurant will be taken up by guests who are staying upstairs, so they're not going to leave the premises at all. And people will finish their meal, go on to other venues. It's not a case of they come in, eat all night, and leave at a specific time. So we anticipate a gradual dispersal, which will form part of our dispersal policy.
Thank you very much. My final point, in connection with the numbers attending, how many do you expect to enjoy the music and the alcohol until 1 or 1:30 in the morning?
As I said earlier, the subject to fire safety regulations, which are yet to be agreed, the premises, when it's full, will hold 130 plus the staff.
130
Plus the staff.
So it could be 500?
No. 130 plus staff. No worries.
Okay, thank you. And the next one? Same applies.
My name's Ken Faulkner, local resident. I point out you keep saying that you've spent a lot of money over there developing it. I'm sure you have, but you must realise that we've spent a lot of money on our properties here, which are, again, over $1 million. So that I'm not sure that we want to have peace and quietness. As you know, under the conditions, you are supposed to go for the prevention of crime and disorder amongst one. When we've had late night drinking and late night licences granted in the past to premises, not even at this end of the town, we have had crime and disorder at the back of where we live off Buttercross Lane. There is a yard there where cars will park. You've got no parking allocated at the moment at your site. We know people will park there because they do for other restaurants. If you're leaving at 1 o'clock to 1:30 at night, when people come to there and doors are slamming, it is very disturbing to the residents. Because there's been a consumption of alcohol, there's always a lot of noise. It happens at the moment. With this addition to that late, will happen even more, we believe. There's also been crime and disorder in that area. There has even been a stabbing in there some while back, I agree, which has meant that we've had problems there. What are you doing to make sure that is not going to happen with your premises? You've talked about how you're going to do crime and disorder indoors, how you're going to have videos and such like, but what about outside of your premises if you're running that late?
Firstly, I would say once again that we shouldn't be compared to other premises. This application should be treated on its own merits. There might have been a stabbing at another premises, but it's not going to happen at ours, and hasn't happened to date at ours. They have been up and running for a short while. And again, in terms of how we manage our crowd when we leave, and all I can say is that our crowd won't cause those issues because of the target audience. It's not a raucous bar. It's not a raucous nightclub. It's a restaurant with a bit of background music, vibe dining, and obviously the hotel. It's in their best interests, and yeah, they have spent £1 million, and we acknowledge that you spend a lot of money on your houses. You know, it's not something that they want to upset the balance of. It's in their best interest to keep you as happy as they possibly can.
I would just interject here, if I might, that every application is dealt with entirely on its own merits and without any feed from other applications or other premises. And we do have a very well laid down policy for dealing with all applications and to keep them within the law, which we obviously always keep to.
Yeah, that is a standard advice I give to the members. Each matter is dealt with on its own merits. Other properties, whatever their closing hours or whatever, are no relevance to this application, and there is no cumulative effect the members have to take account of. I speak people sometimes saying, well, there's too many of this type of establishment in the high street already. That is irrelevant. One thing, perhaps at this stage, you were talking about noise limiter. Can I hand you some suggested conditions for you to consider? Can someone hand it down? Debbie? Oh,
Would you? If you want, please.
Yeah. Just to consider while the meeting's going on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please continue.
Thank you, Chair. The second point is prevention of public nuisance is a requirement. You have said that you could have up to 130 people at this premises. Even if there's 4 to a car leaving those, and even if only half of them leave by car, that's a considerable number of people. With cars slamming and going away, the noise as people leave restaurants in the area outside of your control, we understand as far as you're talking about within the hotel, but outside will be considerable. Last time when you answered my question on crime and disorder, you said it won't be our sort of people. You cannot know that because you cannot know. You would hope, and I hope it is the case, that you have the right sort of people, but you don't know. How are you going to control this noise outside that late? Up to 11 o'clock, fine, but after that, we're talking about late times. Why should you have a licence to that late?
Was your point in relation to crime and disorder or public nuisance?
My point made was I spoke about crime and disorder last time, and I said that your answer was it won't be our sort of people. It could well be you don't know that. You hope it won't be. The point I was making then was that come back to the parking now, which is another reason, public nuisance, which people with up to 130 people leaving at 1 o'clock in the morning would be a public nuisance with cars going, doors slamming and people talking as they leave. What have you done to cover that, although you might hope it won't happen?
Can I just say here that the problems of parking in Epping are not something relevant to this specific application. They are a general matter for the authorities in Epping, but not specific to this application. If you wish to answer, please do, but it cannot form a part of our decision making.
Chair, can I just say I wasn't referring to the parking. I was referring to the fact that people will come with cars to this venue, specific to this venue, and will be leaving under the application for 1 o'clock at 1 o'clock or 1:30 in the morning. The noise that will be created by those cars, which will have to be parked within the area somewhere, will be quite high at that time of the morning. So it does, with respect, I feel it does apply to this venue.
I'll take your point. Okay. If you wish to answer, please do.
Chair, of course. In the first instance, repeat myself again, it'll be a slow dispersal. It's a restaurant. It's not like a nightclub where the music gets turned off and everybody leaves at the same time. So it will be a gradual dispersal. Secondly, it's a hotel, so there will be a number of people that will stay in the hotel having had their meal or have a drink inside the restaurant bar area. So they won't actually be leaving and going out onto the streets at all. Thirdly, they're developing a relationship at the moment with a local cab company. So they will ensure that anyone waiting for a cab will wait inside. They'll be asked to wait inside the premises, so they won't be standing out on the streets. When the cab arrives, the cab firm will be asked and told, don't bother bibbing your horns. We want a text to our customer or a text to the venue so that they can just exit the venue, get in the car and go. So in terms of, you've heard 130 as a number, but it's not 130 all leaving in one point, as per my last 3 points. They're not all leaving together at the same time. Dribs and drabs. So hopefully that will reduce your concerns. And again, remember, Epping isn't a little village, it's a busy high street. So there's a level of noise anyway that's already being created.
Okay, thank you. Do you have another question or have you finished? Okay, in which case, can I have the next objector, please?
Yeah, can I just ask
Can you identify yourself first?
Oh, sorry, Mia Lasanti, owner of the flat, one of the flats. Can I ask how many hotel rooms are there, please?
Sorry, 10.
10? It was a question I was going to ask, so yeah.
And maybe this is ignorance on my part, but realistically, how many people come to stay in Epping? Because I personally wouldn't know anyone that would come to the area unless they lived here.
I mean, maybe the way to answer that is that, if you look at the history of the building, if you look at the actual quality of the hotel rooms, I actually disagree. People will come and stay. I'm absolutely convinced. I've seen it for the first time today, and I'm totally convinced that premises will fill up its hotel rooms on a regular basis. People do have business here. People do use this as a place to go to their businesses. Maybe they want to stay just outside of London. There's lots of reasons why people would stay in Epping. I feel you might be doing it a disservice there.
The reason I say that is because the hotel, it seems, that was there before you took over was so, what's the word, unestablished, so unused, that in the end they end up putting up refugees, if I believe. And we had disturbance from that.
So just just to clarify, we're obviously a totally different establishment to the previous occupants, and on the basis of your concern, I'd like to share with you the images of what we've created, and what we are trying to create as a business as a whole is a lifestyle experience where we are selling weekends. We have treatment rooms. We're offering additional services, things like pillow menus, this kind of thing. It's that kind of level of establishment. It's going to be a 5-star establishment with a very, very high level of service, room service, all of these things. It's totally, totally different to what was there before, and just unrecognisable.
I guess my concern is I could still probably hold my hands up and bet everything I own that not a single person I would know that live in all of Essex would come to Epping to stay in that hotel. And my concern is that you're using this as a leverage to get to say, oh, we're not going to disturb you because we're not going to disturb the hotel guests, when in fact that hotel is probably not going to be used that often.
Chair, I think I would just say at that point that whether the business is a success or not is not relevant to this hearing. We're not I know I've brought in the rooms in the hotel, but we're not actually talking about that as an application at the moment. It's important because these guys genuinely don't want to upset their hotel guests, but whether the young lady there thinks that it's going to be used or not is relevant to this application. It's not a relevant point. It's a moot point. It's her opinion, but not relevant to whether they should be granted a premises.
I take the point. As I say, the application is judged entirely on its own merits rather than what might happen at some stage in the future. Okay. More questions?
Yes, sorry. In the summer you mentioned that the restaurant is fully air conditioned, so you'll be keeping the doors shut, noise pollution inside, etc. But there is the courtyard, which you mentioned will be cleared at 10 p.m. So this is new, because when I spoke to the general manager the other day, that was not the case at all. And can I just add that 10 p.m. is still very late? Like, I have a young baby, so, and I think a lot of people maybe here might even go to bed before 10 o'clock. So that is still very late, in my opinion, to be so close to our bedroom windows. And if I'm allowed to share a picture, I would, just so that you can fully understand how close it actually is.
Well, that can't actually be part of the evidence because it's not been presented in time to go into
which is a shame, because it's very difficult to explain the level of disruption that we're going to experience without you seeing the property.
Okay.
And I'm not allowed to show this. Oh yeah, go. One more question. Parking, I know you've said that you don't really have many parking spaces and that you're working on this. I'm not allowed to show this picture, but I will anyway, because this is your cars outside my bedroom window.
Well, that's interesting, but we can't. Again, it's not part of the placed
Okay,
evidence
just another
before,
one.
so we can't actually consider that.
I know, but it's really disappointing that you say that it's not relevant when it is. It's my bedroom window.
It's not a question of being not relevant. It's not part of the information pack that is been presented to the panel. That's why we can't accept it.
I
All
know.
of these things have to be presented first and then distributed. It goes out on the website. It's given
Yeah.
to both sides in advance, and that's why we can't
Then
consider
I'm
it.
really sorry, I will apologise. But the only reason they weren't submitted before is because it's been happening since our objections were submitted.
Okay, we'll
So I
take
couldn't
that.
physically
We will
put it in
take that
before.
point. Okay, and we have one other objector.
Oh, sorry, just one more question.
Oh, you've got another one, right? Go ahead.
And then you mentioned the gradual disperse of guests, but I just want to highlight, because I have looked at the closing times at all the other bars and restaurants on the high street, they actually tend to close a lot earlier than what you are requesting. So you're saying there will be a gradual disperse of people and everyone won't be leaving at the same time, but looking at that information, it does seem that everyone is likely to stay at Funky Monk until it closes, quite simply because there is nowhere else to go.
Yeah, Chair, I disagree with that comment. They're not the only place that, if you're of a mind to grant, will have a late licence. There are other venues within the town that have licences as late. Is it the Black Lion opposite? There you go. So from local experience, there are another 3 there. And they're not looking to attract that late night crowd. You know, people will already be in there having their meals.
Okay.
Can I just answer the points that were made earlier as well about the smoking area? I just want to remind you of the agent to change principle. I'm not going to read it out. And in regards to the 10 p.m. closure, I think actually that is a reasonable time to close what is essentially a pub garden. There are plenty of pubs out there that don't close their areas until 11:30. So 10 o'clock is actually relatively early, I would suggest. And I sympathise, of course I do, but at the end of the day, you know, a premises has been bought on the back of a hotel stroke bar, as per the principle of change, agent of change, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
The last time that was used as a pub garden was when was it the thatched pub, whatever it was called, was there. And it was thatched house, sorry. And it was so long ago that the flats weren't there. So we didn't buy properties thinking that there was a beer garden next door. I bought the property when it was Prezzo. That was a walkway. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that they would be able to turn a public walkway into a beer garden, because I never would have bought that.
Okay.
Chair, I think it may be a valid point to make there at this stage as well, that today I've had a walk around the premises, and my advice has been to the venue that in terms of that courtyard area is they do get an acoustician in to look at how they can dampen down the noise as much as possible, irrespective of coming here and listening to the ladies' complaints. That, you know, it'd be my advice to do that anyway, just as a matter of courtesy, as well as closing it, emptying it at 10 p.m. Now, by 10 p.m, not 20 minutes later, but by 10 o'clock.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, if, as you will probably maybe advised later on, if it is granted, there is the right to review if problems do occur, and the council's community resilience team do have the right to serve abatement notices if noise does cause problems, even if whatever's granted in the licence.
Okay, thank you. I was going to come on to that last, that there are other bodies within the council who deal with nuisance, and there is the question, perhaps a good time to mention it, all licences are subject to review. If anyone is causing a particular nuisance or a problem, all licences can be called back in for review, and these panels can put their own conditions on the licence at that time to deal with that particular problem. So there is an ongoing way of dealing with any new problems that arise.
And potentially it could be revoking the licence.
Yes. Okay. Yep.
On that point, of course, yes, they can be reviewed. They don't want to get anywhere near that area. And if the responsible authorities were concerned, they will want to put a stop to it before getting to that point anyway. I.e. they'd either be here today raising their concerns, or later on down the line, if there are concerns, they would then start to engage with the premises, and they would wholeheartedly engage with the police or licensing authorities, because they don't want to be reviewed. It's the last thing they want.
Okay.
And certainly not an abatement notice either. Lots of money.
We do take the point. We have had plenty of applications and reviews where the police have attended, but they haven't today. So I simply make the point that they decided not to bring anything forward. Another point, yes.
Sorry, last one, and I will be quiet. If your intention this whole time has been to have a late night bar, restaurant, wine, restaurant, whatever you want to call it, why in January, when you originally asked for our permission to open Funky Monk, did you request for a restaurant, a fish restaurant, to be able to serve alcohol alongside a meal with a closing time of 11, and allowed us to get to this point where we are within a week of opening to move the goalpost? You say there are times that you review the licence. In my opinion, the most fair thing to do was to open from what they requested initially back in January, the fish restaurant to serve alcohol alongside the meal, open to 11. And if you want to move the goalpost, you request it in 6 months' time or after that you've been open and you've proven to us that it's a harmonious relationship between the residents and the bar.
Chair, I think
I might just step in there first to say, I understand the point you're making, but we are only looking at the application in front of us today, and we can look at nothing else.
But also, very quickly, Chair, they didn't take the lease until June. And we're talking about January, so I think there may have been some confusion there.
I can't answer that, and I don't know whether you can either. No. Okay. Do we have one other objector who wishes to add anything?
Yes, thank you. My name is
And
Claire
identify
Liggins.
yourself, yeah.
I'm a local resident.
Excuse me,
Claire Liggins. Thank you. In regards to the music and the sound levels, what testing have you done to make sure that you're not disturbing local residents? My understanding is that you had a soft opening on Saturday night and the music levels at 1 AM were quite loud.
That's fine. Yeah, that was the test, and they've learned a valid lesson from that the music was too loud for residents upstairs, so that won't happen again.
Sorry, what have you done to make sure that doesn't happen again? I understand you're saying it won't happen again, but what have you put in place?
So firstly, the event that we carried out on the weekend is not our anticipated style of trade at all. We are a restaurant and a hotel. That particular event wasn't that, and the music was at a much louder level than it would ever be in our normal course of our trade. However, as part of a solution already, we have isolated a couple of the speakers within the venue that sit near large panes of glass to the rear of the venue, in order that there's less noise pollution. So that's what we've done already.
Thank you.
And of course, we've offered noise limiter, which again will reduce those concerns.
Okay, I'm assuming the noise limiter there is going to be part of the conditions of the licence should it be granted. It's not, or you're going to do it anyway?
Well, the applicants can offer and we can put a condition, so you've got two opportunities there. It's now the chance for the applicants to...
Sorry, I've just
you've got another one.
Questions.
Yes, please go ahead.
The courtyard you say is closing at 10:30. What are you doing about smokers?
So we have a cobble space at the front. So what it is, when after 10 o'clock and they get dispersed in, we have concierge team there to make sure no one goes through. So we're actually going to gate that bit off so that no one can actually get through that passageway. So once that bit's shut, everyone goes to not actually outside the front onto the high street, where the cobble area is, will be shut off from the rear of the building. And also we're going to limit the numbers, 26 people at a time allowed outside for a cigarette, which will be managed by the SSI, which is the security team.
And no drinks.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, and obviously no drinks allowed outside and things like that at all. You're 6 people at a time for a cigarette, and it will be blocked off to the rear of the building. It can only stay in that cobble section at the front of the building, but not actually on the main high street.
And my final question, and I'd just like to know what experience you guys have at running a venue like this, because obviously there's been a couple of issues already. We've had the bottles, we've had an event on Saturday night that apparently isn't like how you're planning to trade, although I question why you held the event if that's not what you're planning to do. But anyway, and so what experience do you have? And, you know, let's be realistic. This is a late night. You're going to serve alcohol late at night. And I take your point that you're looking for the, dare I say, older market, but I am one of those people, and I have definitely seen people my age at 1 o'clock in the morning falling down drunk. That because they're 25 and above doesn't mean they don't make noise. And so I guess for me, I just like comfort that you guys actually know what you're doing, and if these things start kicking off, that you're experienced enough to handle them and have policies and procedures in place such that kind of the impact is immediate.
Absolutely agree. So I'll let Billy, sorry, blank then, explain his experience in a minute. But what I would say in terms of your concerns around the drunkenness, falling around drunk, etc. So my background is a policing background. I ran a licensing unit for 7 years, and I believe that training is key, whether it be in the police, whether it be in a licensed venue, whether it be running Tesco's. With adequate training, you can manage most scenarios. So I will labour the point with these guys that, you know, they've got to get their staff training. They've got to get their staff trained in terms of welfare and vulnerability engagement, recognising somebody who might actually be close to the limit and have had too much, and one more drink's going to throw them over the edge. I'd also point out that actually it's against the law to serve to someone who is drunk. So they need to consider the law, but they also need to consider the welfare of that person. I know you're smiling, and you could probably, and it is at odds, you know, in the entire country. It probably happens on a daily basis that people who are too drunk, you know, do get served. But the point is, it's against the law. But the other point I would make is that, you know, when their staff are trained properly, it's not a case of look at the state of that person there, let's just kick them out on the street. That they will deal with, you know, that internally, so that person doesn't end up out on the street vomiting on your pavement or doorstep. And it's all around that training. Billy, can you just explain your previous experience in terms of licensed premises?
Oh, hello. Hi, so obviously I'm the DPS. In terms of my experience, I've general managed hotel establishments before. Over the last sort of 3.5 years, we've opened up our own sort of seafood restaurant already, which has all the procedures that we already have in place. In terms of the event which you were saying, that was an event to test. It was a family party. We use it as a test to test, obviously, like you said, the bottle bins. We've kept them in the place that they were there before. We've now obviously made the decision to get a bottle chute and move them out of the way. With staffing, we haven't hired staff just, you know, part-timers and things or people who are just at uni or having a gap year at uni. Everyone is experienced, well-trained. We have training manuals in place for every single person to come in and have to abide by the training manual. And obviously all staff are here to represent us as a firm. And yeah, my experience is generally in restaurants and hotels, and I've done a pretty good job at it, which is why we're here today. And I'm not you know, and I've already owned my own place, which has been with my partner Dean, and we've done very, very well. And I want to be here today trying to get this licence if I didn't believe I could achieve it. So that's all I can say, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, if that's your last question, it's now an opportunity for the... Oh, sorry, you want to come back? Please do.
Right. Alan Phillips again. Just an observation on going back to noise, and you made much of the play, and I fully accept it, that not everybody's going to be leaving at 1 o'clock. When the premises close, it'll be a gradual dispersal as people finish and go about their way. I'm just considering the noise issue of 10 people leaving at once and slamming their car doors, or 10 people leaving at 10-minute intervals, slamming their car doors one at a time, is still a nuisance late at night. You know, one car door slam is enough to wake people up, disturb your baby, and so on. So what you're doing, you're spreading the load, and it's not horrendous noise, but it's enough to cause, you know, to be a nuisance.
just reiterate the fact that it's a high street. It's not noise that's over and above a normal high street, which this is.
I think
And
the
they're
panel,
not the only venue open at that late at night.
the panel will take that into consideration. It isn't an area with a number of entertainment venues, and we are aware of the noise and of some of the problems which we've had to deal with at intervals. So, would you like to come back? They then have the question. The applicant has the right then to question any of you.
I know,
at that
I just,
point.
but very quickly, because you mentioned that you were working with a specific taxi company, so that you'd have a process in place to minimise noise. Where will the taxis be collecting people up? Because a lot of the time at the moment, taxis do pull into that back part, which is extremely noisy for us. So maybe there's a way that they can pick customers up from the front or something like that to minimise noise.
Yeah, I mean, obviously now we've heard that, we'll ensure that taxis go to the front rather than, you know, into your cul-de-sac. Absolutely. It's, you know, that's what they want, is to engage and make sure that, you know, we can come to agreement so these things that affect you don't happen. So yeah, to the front.
Okay. Appreciate
All right.
it.
Yes, please.
I'd just like to make one point. We are sitting here talking about an extension of the licence from 11 to 1, which is our main concern. We understand the licence other times are fine. All the time, the answers have been given in regard to the high-class restaurant, hotel that is going to be there. But in the original summary that your colleagues gave, you stated there were 90 seating places and 40 standing places. This means it is a drinking bar. It will be a drinking bar with 40 places late at night. It will be one that's open late at night in Epping, which I don't think there are any others that late, apart from the Black Lion for functions. They talk about the Black Lion, that's a function restaurant for a backyard. Going on till 1 o'clock, and the Black Lion I think is 12 o'clock at any rate. So the answers you've given along the time have always been regard to your restaurant. Why 40 standing places if it's not a drinking bar, which people can go to after they've finished in other bars and come to yours for a drink?
Yes, please.
Chair, the committee is quite right that every application needs to be considered on its own merits. However, there's been a number of comments regarding the hours of the other premises in the High Street. I've got a few here just to give the committee an indication. So we've got the Black Lion, which the gentleman just mentioned, is Sunday to Thursday until midnight, Friday and Saturday until 1. The Duke of Wellington is Monday to Sunday until 1:30. The George and the Dragon is Sunday to Thursday until midnight and Friday and Saturday until 1, with opening hours till 1:30. Kasha is again 1 o'clock, 7 days a week. Archie's Lounge Bar is 2 o'clock Monday to Sunday, so 7 days a week. And the Epping Roof Garden is Sunday to Thursday until midnight and Friday and Saturday until 2 a.m. So there are other premises in the area that are operating late night.
Thank you. There's one or two that I've never even heard of, but I don't doubt they must be surviving. Yes?
All of these places are nowhere near as close to residentials as this application is. That's my only point on that.
Sorry, Mr. King, you want to come back on that or not? I don't think,
the point
I don't
was just to
think you can.
illustrate there's been a lot of back and forth, Chair, between the hours of operation for the other bars in the area, and that just gives you an indication of the kind of times that they've got.
Yep. Okay, that's fine. You do now have the right to question the objectors if you wish. No? In which case you can make a closing statement but must not introduce anything that was not in your earlier submission.
Chair, I'll be fairly brief. The application is for a hotel, wine bar, restaurant. It's going to have correct policies and procedures in place to manage the concerns. Those policies and procedures and items in place. Noise limiter, a dispersal policy, limits on the smoking areas, and obviously the conditions that are in front of you already. It's run by persons of good character, and they wish to be part of the community and going forward. They don't wish to ruin their large investment and find themselves one of these venues that's, you know, being reviewed. They determine not to be in that position. And also, as we've cleared up, you know, their late hours, then not the only person within the high street that wishes to seek late hours, but actually they're not the latest. There's plenty of places there that close at 2 a.m. And those places are near to residential premises. Going forward, you know, they don't wish to disturb the neighbourhood. They will manage their premises in accordance with the licensing objectives. They are persons of good character, and I would invite you to issue their licence as applied for, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So have you had a chance to look at the... Can I send down? Yeah, just... That's the neighbourhood's noise team.
So they're independent, it's not like...
They work for the council.
So yeah, they're employed by the council in the noise team. They're the ones that assess noise, antisocial behaviour. You know, they'd be the ones that serve the noise abatement notices if necessary. It's just you said there would be noise limiter. That is the council's standard wording.
Yep. Okay. So you would be happy to accept the council's standard wording on noise limiting. Okay. Thank you very much.
Do we know what the standard is at all?
Because it will vary. The council don't employ a standard. Everyone will be shut at 50 decibels, for example. It's premises relevant.
A bit like the application.
Sorry.
It's a bit like the application. They visit, do an assessment with you.
Yep. Okay. I don't know whether... I thought that sort of was a closing statement from the objectors, unless you would like to add anything further, but you can't bring up anything new that you haven't mentioned so far. So if you'd like to make a closing statement.
If I may, I will be brief. The questions I had as part of this statement have already been answered in part. I would say, though, that the public houses in Epping, with their extended licensing hours, provide the drinkers of Epping with enough opportunity to imbibe. I don't think we need another one. There are 2 clubs in Cottage Lane.
I'll answer it.
Unfortunately, that resulted in civil disturbance in the High Street. We had nearly 100 people. The police were involved, and those 2 clubs were closed down very soon after. I think we want to avoid a similar situation arising. I'm reassured to some extent by the comments made, but I can't really see the need to increase the length of hours of opening from 12 till 1 or 1:30. I think there will be problems with local residents and the parking that will obviously take place on adjoining roads. Epping is a quiet, semi-rural market town. This type of extended use to 1:30 in the morning, cars leaving at 2 in the morning possibly, is quite, in my opinion, inappropriate. And I again confirm my objection, prevention of crime and disorder, public safety and prevention of public nuisance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You've raised some items which, again, we cannot consider as part of this particular licence application, which has to be specific to this premises and the application in front of us, and to nothing else. In which case, do we remain in here? I don't think so. In which case, can I ask everyone to withdraw for a short time while we consider the application, and we will then ask you all to come back for our decision. Thank you. We consider... Just turn myself on. Sorry?
We are.
Are you back on? Well done. Thank you. We consider that the application satisfies the necessary requirements to be considered as it is on the prescribed form, it has been advertised and relevant notifications given. We are grateful to the parties for their presentations to us this afternoon. We have taken these and the written material submitted to us into account. We have considered what is appropriate to promote the 4 licensing objectives and the relevant parts of the Council's licensing policy and the Home Office's guidance. During our deliberations in private session, our advisory officers gave us the following advice. Conditions imposed must be appropriate, be capable of being enforceable, and must not undermine the licensing objectives, and that each case must be determined on its merits. The decision of this subcommittee is that the application for a premises licence in respect of Funky Monk 236 High Street, Epping, CM16 4AP, be granted subject to the conditions as submitted by the applicant within the application, and which we consider are reasonable and proportionate and will not undermine the four licensing objectives, namely the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. In addition, the following conditions, which we consider are reasonable and proportionate and will not undermine the licensing objectives, are that a noise limiter must be fitted to the musical amplification system and maintained in accordance with the Council's criteria. We also attach the mandatory conditions contained in sections 19 to 21 of the Licensing Act 2003. The applicant and the objectors are reminded of their right of appeal to the Magistrates' Court within 21 days of the written notification of this decision, and of the review mechanism under the Licensing Act 2003 because of any matters arising in the future at the premises in conjunction with any of the four licensing objectives, which I shall now sign, dated the 8th of November 2022. I'd like to thank all of you for attending.